Okay, 9.2, we are going to be talking about parabolas and how to, if they're not written in vertex form, how to actually write them in vertex form. Because sometimes they're going to want you to do that. And this would be one more way you could figure out your vertex. You can take it from standard form and write it into vertex form. Okay, before I can show you how to write it into vertex form, you first need to understand perfect square trinomials. So a perfect square trinomial is where you can take, this is a trinomial means 3, right? 3 terms. And you can take that and it ends up being written as a perfect square. Because if you were to multiply this out, 9 times 9 multiplies to be 81, and those add to be 18. So that's why this is a perfect square trinomial. It is written as x plus 9 squared. How could I write x squared minus 8x plus 16 as a perfect square? Good. This factor should be x minus 4 times x minus 4, which is really x minus 4 squared. Do we all agree with that? Okay, because those add to be negative 8 and multiply to be positive 16, because a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay. So when you want to find the c value that could make a perfect square trinomial, so if you're looking at x squared plus bx plus c, if you wanted to make a perfect square, you're going to have to decide what value you want there in order to make this value a perfect square. So the first thing you would do is you take half of your b value, half of that middle number. Yes, Josh and Christopher Berger here. I'll give these to you guys in a minute, okay? So in this case, we're going to look at this number right here. So if I want to find what c value needs to be here, the first thing I'm going to do is take half of 16. So I go 16 divided by 2 is 8, okay? So what that means is when I'm writing my perfect square, I'm going to end up having x plus 8 and x plus 8, okay? And in order to find what value you would need to multiply, you always square that number. And what is 8 squared? 64. So I would want c to be 64. 64 is a value that I could make this a perfect square. Okay? So they want us to find the value for c and then also write this as a square binomial. So that would be x plus 8 squared. Okay, so again, in order to find my value, what do we do? You always take that middle number and we divide it by 2. And what's negative 2 divided by 2? Negative 1. Okay, so this value is what would be my parentheses, x minus 1, x minus 1. But in order to find what that c value would be, you'd have to square these or multiply negative 1 times negative 1. And what's negative 1 times negative 1? 1. So that means that my c value is positive 1, and my perfect square is x minus 1 squared. For your homework and stuff, you're not really going to see too many of these that end up not reducing to make a whole number. But if you did, I'm just going to show you what I would do. So we take that middle number and we take negative 15 divided by 2. But it doesn't reduce to be a whole number, so just leave it as negative 15 over 2. Okay? So on this one, my two parentheses would be x minus 15 over 2 and x minus 15 over 2. To see what those multiply to be, we just square them. So negative 15 squared is 225, and then 2 squared is 4. So just remember you're squaring your top number and your bottom number. So in this case, my c value is 225 over 4, and then my perfect square is x minus 15 over 2. Okay. So now for the fun part. Okay, so we're going to take what we just learned and now we're going to put it into actually finding the vertex form. Okay, so this right now is in standard form, and now we're going to change it to be vertex form. This is what you need to do. The first thing we're going to do is write this as y equals, you're going to make a parenthesis, and I'm going to write this as x squared minus 4x, and I'm going to go plus blank and close my parenthesis because I want to end up making this a perfect square. Are we so far okay? So far in the problem I've taken care of this part, but I still have that -1, right? So on the outside of this parenthesis, I'm also going to write my -1 because I have to keep that. And this is the part that's just a little bit confusing. But I'm going to add a number right here, right? Because I'm going to find a C value, and I'm going to add it here. But in order to make everything balance, if you add something, I'm also going to end up subtracting that same thing, so minus the blank. Because if you add one number and subtract that same number, it's like you never even did it, right? They like cancel out and make 0. Because you can't just like add a number and then not either add it to their side or whatever. You have to be fair. So you're like wanting to balance it. So if I add something, I also have to subtract it so that it stays equal. Okay? So then what we're going to do is complete the square. So what do I do in order to complete the square? Okay, very good. -4 divided by 2 is -2, and then we square it, which makes
4.
a +4. Yes, she's here. Okay, so that means that 4 goes in each of these blanks. In order to complete the square, I need a +4 here, and if I'm adding 4, I also need to subtract 4 to make it balance. Okay? And then now we're going to write this as a perfect square. So x minus 4x plus 4, how do I make that a perfect square? What will it be? It'll be x minus 2 squared, right? And the number that goes here is always the half number that you took. Okay, remember that? Yes. Okay, and then all you're going to do is simplify this. What is -1 minus 4? -5. So now this is my equation in descriptive or vertex form. And then they also just want you to give the vertex. So what is the vertex of this equation? 2, -5. And if you had gone through and done like x equals -b over 2a, found the x value, plugged it in, and found the y value, you would have ended up getting the same answer for your vertex. Okay? All right, so let's try this again. So when you start with this problem, the first thing you always want to do is make your parentheses and your adding of a blank and your subtracting of a blank. Okay? So we're going to write this as y equals, x squared plus 20x plus blank. Close your parentheses. Okay, so we're always taking these two numbers and leaving the number that doesn't have an x on the outside of those parentheses. So I'm going to have plus 90 here, and if I add a blank on one side, I'm also going to subtract the same blank. Okay, now how do I find my value for my blanks? Good, you take your middle term 20 divided by 2, which is 10, and then we square it, and that makes 100. So 100 goes in each of these blanks. So when I'm writing this now as a perfect square, it's going to be y equals, and it's x what? X plus 10, because it's always whatever my half number was. Okay, so x plus 10 squared, and then a positive 90 and a negative 100 makes what? Negative 10. And then what is my vertex here? Negative 10, negative 10 is correct. Is anyone not sure where I got numbers that you want me just to kind of re-talk about it?
So on the y equals the parentheses x plus 10, you have to do the opposite of it. Is that what I
Oh, when you're getting that 10? Yes, always the parentheses. When you pull out that number, you get the opposite for your vertex. Other questions? Okay, moving on. You think you guys can try this one on your own? Good, I think you can. When you get the answer, write it on your whiteboard. So I'm going to give you a minute here to try this one on your own.
Yes.
It's the same thing as a big Y. So yeah, even though it says g of x, you can just write that as a y. Either it's still the same. I'm sorry. I got a different y value. So double check your y value. I got a different y value. I got a different y value. Yes. 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 I got a different y value. Actually, in the x value, no, that's the x value is right. The y value is not. There you go. Good. Do you guys want another minute? You want me to start going? The y value is different. Nope. Yes. Yes. Okay. So let's see where some of you went wrong. So the first thing is, if you want to write this as y, you can. So I'm going to write y equals, we have x squared plus 6x plus blank, close your parenthesis. What value is this? A -4, and since I added a blank, I also need to subtract a blank. Okay, so are we all good so far here? Okay, so what is my next step? Good, we take 6 and we divide it by 2, and 6 divided by 2 is, and 3 squared is 9. So 9 is the value that goes in both of those blanks. Okay? Now when you're writing your equation, this is going to be y equals, and it's going to be x plus 3 squared, and then you have -4 and -9. What do those add to be? -13. That's where some of you messed up. Okay, and then what would my vertex be on this problem? Very good. -3, -13 is correct. Okay, questions? All right, what is different about example 5 from example 4? You have an a value here in front, and when you are completing the square, you do not want an a value. Okay, so this is how we deal with it. Again, remember, we're kind of only looking at these first two terms to begin with, okay? So could I take 5 out of 10? Yes. So what we're going to do is we're going to go y equals, and I'm going to take out the 5. So we have 5 and then parenthesis. And when I divide this by 5, that makes x squared plus, and this divided by 5 makes 2x. And then we're going to continue the same way, and that what will I write next? Plus a blank, close my parenthesis. What do I still have at the end here? Plus 7.
Minus.
And then this is the tricky part. This is really 5 times the blank, right? So what am I going to need over here? Negative 5 times the blank. So remember, you always have to be fair. So this is 5 times this blank. This has to be negative 5 times this blank. So if you ever have a number out in front of that parenthesis, you need to make sure you have it in front of the parenthesis with your blank on the other side. Okay? All right, and then you work this one the same way. So what will I do?
Divide 2 by 2.
Good. 2 divided by 2 equals 1, and 1 squared is 1. So 1 goes in each of these blanks. So now when I write my equation, y equals 5 parenthesis, and what will be in my parentheses? X plus 1 squared. And then over here, this means we have 7, and then negative 5 times 1 is negative 5, and 7 minus 5 is plus 2.
Wait, I don't get it. Why do you have a 1 there and not a 10? I mean, not 25. Because I thought you have to, like, square it.
We're taking that middle number 2.
Oh, you're taking that middle number. You're not taking it from the original problem.
No. Are we good now?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, and then what would be my vertex on this?
-1, -2. Positive. Oh, that's what I meant.
Negative 1, positive 2. Very good. Yes? Y took the 5 out because when you are completing the square, we need our A to not have a number with it. Like the x squared term needs to not have a number. Okay? And so we are factoring that out. So we're like taking out the GCF, but we don't need to take a GCF out of this number because it's not part of my completing the square. And remember that A value is telling you like your width. Do you guys remember that? Like if you have a fraction in front, it'll be wider. If you have a whole number, it's narrower. If there's nothing there, it's like an average width. Okay, same thing when you're completing the square, you also do not want that x squared to be negative. You always want x squared to be positive and to be by itself. So on example 6, what am I going to end up factoring out? A negative 2. Okay, so when I write this one, we have y equals, and we're going to take out a negative 2. So when I divide negative 2 here, that just becomes x squared, right? A positive x squared. And then 8 divided by negative 2 makes a negative 4x. And then we write plus blank and close our parentheses. I still have a minus 4. Now on this one, this is saying negative 2 times a blank. So what will I write here? Positive 2 times the blank. Because you always want to do the opposite, right? So since this one is negative 2 times the blank, this will be a positive 2 times the blank. Are we okay? All right, what is our next step now? Very good. We take negative 4. Negative 4 divided by 2 makes negative 2, and negative 2 squared makes a positive 4. So positive 4 goes in each of these blanks. When we complete this square, we have y equals negative 2 parenthesis, and what will it be? X minus 2 squared. Very good. And then you might have to do a little math here. So to the side, I have negative 4 plus, and 2 times 4 is 8, and negative 4 plus 8 is positive 4, right? Okay, good. And then we have plus 4 there at the end. Are we good? So what's my vertex? 2, 4. Very good.
Okay, wait, how about
Yeah.
like you only did -2 on the first two numbers?
But I did -2 on the first two numbers.
Positive 2.
This should be positive 2. I'm sorry.
Like, why didn't you divide all by 4? No,
Because when we're completing the square, we're only dealing with these numbers. And so we're only taking out a -2 here because that's the only thing that's in the parenthesis. This -4 is not in the parenthesis. So you're not taking any part of it out. Just like on this one, you know, we took the 5 from these two terms, but then the +7's out of the parentheses, so we didn't have to take a 5 from it. Okay? All right, any other questions on this one? Vienna.
How come we didn't put, like, on example 5,
Uh-huh.
it's 5x plus 1 squared, how come we don't have -1 after? Because on this one you have +4 after parentheses in the answer.
Because this part right here, this part that's outside, that's simplified to be a +4. Over here, this right here, +7 and a -5 times 1, that's simplified to be a 2. This simplified to be a 4. Are we better now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, the last one, number 7, I actually would prefer you to try this on your own, but for time, we're going to just go ahead and do it together. So what is my first step on this? Take out the 3. Very good. So we take out the 3. And again, remember, when we're taking out the 3, we're only dealing with the terms with the x's. Okay? So when I divide this divided by 3, I just get x squared. And then 18 divided by 3 will give me 6x. And then I have plus blank. Good. And then I still have what at the end? +7. And then since this is saying 3 times the blank, I need to have -3 times the blank. Okay, what is next in completing the square?
6 by 2.
Good. 6 divided by 2 is,
3.
and 3 squared is 9. So 9 goes in each of these blanks. When I'm writing my equation now, it's going to be y equals what?
X plus 3 squared.
3 parenthesis
Yeah.
x plus 3 squared. And then now we need to simplify this. So this is 7 minus, and 9 times 3 is 27. And 7 minus 27 is -20. So -20 goes right here. And so with that information now, what is my vertex? -3, -20 is correct. Any questions? Okay,